The mind is not a mirror that merely reflects what happens around you. It is a magnifier that enlarges and amplifies whatever you focus on. Every single thought you hold, every mental image you allow to linger, begins to grow roots in your consciousness and then shapes how you perceive life. People often believe that overthinking is a sign of awareness or intelligence, that thinking something through 100 times will somehow make them more prepared or protected. But overthinking is not preparation. It is the continuous magnification of doubt, fear, and uncertainty. When you overthink, you are not observing reality, you are distorting it, stretching small details into enormous problems until they block your ability to see clearly. The mind, when left unmanaged, behaves like a lens that exaggerates whatever it focuses on, and most people unconsciously use it to magnify worry, not wonder. Think about this. Two people can face the same situation, yet one sees opportunity and the other sees disaster. The difference is not in the situation itself, but in the mental image each person holds. The one who magnifies possibilities feels energized, creative, and alive, while the one who magnifies problems feels trapped, anxious, and helpless. Overthinking is the act of giving your energy and attention to the wrong picture. It's like staring at a small shadow until it looks like a monster. You begin to believe your own mental projection, and soon your emotions follow. The heart starts racing, the muscles tighten, and the body prepares for something that doesn't even exist outside your imagination. This is the power of a magnifying mind. It can turn fiction into felt reality. The truth is that the mind cannot tell the difference between something vividly imagined and something physically experienced. When you continuously replay negative possibilities, your brain and body respond as if they are happening right now. You are rehearsing pain, disappointment, and failure before they ever occur. This is why overthinking exhausts you. It drains emotional energy on mental scenarios that may never happen. The magnifier is turned in the wrong direction. Instead of expanding your awareness and your confidence, it multiplies confusion and fear. And the more you feed it, the more it grows until it becomes a pattern that runs automatically. People often say, "I can't stop thinking." But that's not entirely true. You cannot stop thoughts from arising, but you can choose which thoughts to feed. The mind will always offer a variety of ideas, some empowering, some disempowering, but you hold the power to decide what stays. Overthinking happens when you forget that you are the thinker, not the thought. You begin to identify with the mental chatter instead of directing it. The moment you pause and observe the mind without reacting, you reclaim control of the magnifier. You begin to see that most of the noise inside your head is not truth. It is just habit. The brain is doing what it has practiced, doing analyzing, comparing, replaying, predicting, because you have trained it to do that through repetition. Every time you indulge an unnecessary thought, you strengthen its grip. When you treat the mind as a magnifier, you begin to respect its creative power. You realize that every mental picture you hold, whether you like it or not, begins to take shape in your external world. If you dwell on lack, you will notice more lack. If you dwell on fear, you will encounter more reasons to be afraid. But if you deliberately hold the image of success, joy, and peace, the same magnifying force begins to work for you instead of against you. The problem is not the power of thought. The problem is unconscious thinking. You have an instrument capable of building empires, yet many use it to construct cages. When you overthink, you are living in mental rehearsal rather than actual experience. Life passes you by while you are trapped in internal debates that lead nowhere. You analyze conversations that are already over. You worry about outcomes that haven't happened. You relive mistakes that can't be changed. Each of these mental movies keeps you anchored to the same emotional frequency. The magnifier keeps expanding what you do not want, and the more attention you give it, the more solid it appears. You start saying, "This is just how I am," forgetting that what you call you is simply a collection of repeated thoughts that you've come to believe. The mind does not care whether it magnifies something beautiful or something destructive. It only obeys the direction of your focus. So, when you wake up and immediately think of problems, the day starts magnifying problems. When you wake up and think of gratitude or possibility, the day starts magnifying that. The law of the mind is simple. Whatever you think about, you bring about. Overthinking is just the misuse of this law, using creative energy to generate limitations instead of liberation. You don't escape overthinking by trying to stop thinking. You escape it by choosing new thoughts that expand rather than contract. It's about shifting the lens. When you notice yourself spiraling into doubt, consciously redirect your attention to a higher idea, something that inspires, excites, or calms you. The magnifier will do the rest. The same force that once enlarged your fears will now enlarge your faith. The same mental power that built your worry will build your wisdom. Once you understand that the mind is a magnifier, you no longer waste energy fighting the thoughts you dislike. You simply stop feeding them and feed the ones that serve your life. Every thought that passes through your mind carries a certain frequency, a vibration that moves into form and begins to shape your outer world. Thoughts are not passive observations of what is happening. They are creative forces that call things into existence. Most people believe they are just describing their lives when they think, but in truth, they are designing them. When a person constantly says, "Nothing ever works out for me," they are not reporting the facts. They are giving the subconscious mind a command to reproduce more of that same experience. The mind listens, the energy responds, and the world rearranges itself to match the inner picture. Every dominant thought is a seed, and the conditions of your life are the harvest. Overthinking is dangerous because it keeps planting seeds of confusion, fear, and limitation. Instead of allowing thought to flow into creation, you trap it in endless loops of analysis, and those loops eventually create exactly what you worry about. When you think, you are not simply processing information, you are engaging in an act of creation. Every image you hold and every emotion you attach to that image sends out a pattern of energy. If that image is one of failure, that frequency attracts failure-type experiences. If that image is one of success, opportunity begins to appear in unexpected ways. This is not mystical. It is how the mind interacts with the field of possibilities around you. People underestimate the power of their inner world because they have been taught to believe only what they can touch and see. But everything physical began as a thought. Every building, every invention, every relationship, every breakthrough first existed as an idea in someone's mind. Thoughts precede things, and what you repeatedly think becomes what you repeatedly experience. The universe, life, or whatever name you choose to give it, does not respond to your words. It responds to the emotional vibration behind your thoughts. Overthinking distorts this creative flow. Instead of thinking from possibility, you think from fear. Instead of using your mind to build, you use it to barricade. Each what if becomes a brick in a wall that blocks your own progress. You begin to live in mental a rehearsal of everything that could go wrong, and because thought is creative, you start to notice more signs that confirm your fears. Your mind is a projector, not a camera. It does not record life, it projects your beliefs onto it. Overthinking turns this projector toward doubt, and doubt becomes the lens through which you interpret reality. You start believing you are unlucky or incapable, but those beliefs are just your own thoughts reflected back to you through experience. Every event begins to validate your inner story, and you don't realize you are the author. Most people mistake thinking for awareness. They assume that by examining something endlessly, they will somehow gain control over it. But in truth, thought creates movement in energy, and energy follows attention. The longer you hold attention on fear, the more momentum it gathers. You can feel it physically, the tension, the quickened heartbeat, the heaviness in your chest. That's your body responding to the frequency of the thought. It's evidence that thoughts are not neutral. They carry power. They shape mood, behavior, and even the opportunities that enter your path. If you want to change your life, you must change the dominant frequency of your thoughts. You can't think scarcity and attract abundance. You can't think failure and manifest success. The inner and outer must align. The creative process of the mind works in a very specific pattern. You think a thought, you imagine it vividly, and then you emotionally identify with it. Once emotion enters, creation begins. Emotion energizes the thought, giving it life. Overthinking intensifies this by adding emotional repetition. The more you replay a fear, the more emotional charge it gathers until it becomes part of your self-concept. At that point, it's not just a thought anymore, it's a belief. And beliefs are the programs that control your behavior without conscious effort. You act in harmony with your beliefs, and your environment rearranges itself to confirm them again and again. This is why people feel stuck. They are not trapped by circumstance. They are trapped by their own repetitive thought patterns that keep producing the same results. If you could see thought as a creative tool instead of a mental commentary, you would treat it with more respect. You would become careful about what you dwell on because you would realize that the mind is always saying yes. It never rejects an idea. It simply takes it as an instruction. When you say, "I don't want to fail," the mind hears fail because that is the image you hold. When you say, I am confident and capable, the mind begins to create conditions that express that statement. Thought is energy directed by will. Whatever idea you emotionally charge becomes magnetized and starts drawing similar energy toward you. This is the essence of creation, not magic, but the science of focus and vibration. Overthinking drains that creative energy because it scatters it in 100 directions. You start 5 ideas and finish none. You make plans and cancel them in your head before you ever take a step. You analyze people's opinions and end up losing touch with your own intuition. The creative current that should be moving through you becomes stagnant. The mind, instead of being a channel of inspiration, becomes a tangled web of doubt. Creativity requires flow, and flow requires trust. You must trust your own decisions, your own instincts, your own vision. Without that trust, thought becomes an endless circle instead of a straight path. When you begin to see thoughts as creative forces, not casual comments, everything changes. You start to think on purpose. You start to build mental pictures that align with what you want to experience rather than what you fear might happen. You begin to understand that your inner conversation is not private, it's a signal sent out into the fabric of life. Every time you repeat a thought, you strengthen its vibration. The question is, what are you rehearsing? Are you rehearsing peace or worry, success or failure, confidence or confusion? The energy doesn't discriminate, it simply amplifies what you give it. Decision is the turning point between thought and action, between potential and reality. Until a decision is made, energy remains scattered and the mind keeps spinning in circles. Overthinking thrives in indecision because the mind hates uncertainty. It wants direction. When you hesitate, you leave space for doubt to enter, and doubt quickly multiplies. You start examining every possible outcome, replaying every scenario, trying to predict the unpredictable. You convince yourself that by thinking longer, you will somehow find the perfect choice, the risk-free path. But that path doesn't exist. The longer you wait for clarity before acting, the further clarity moves away from you. It's not thinking that creates clarity, it's decision. The moment you decide, the fog begins to lift because energy that was once scattered becomes focused. Decision is power concentrated. Most people never experience the real strength of their mind because they live in hesitation. They study opportunities, they imagine what could happen, they even plan every detail, but they don't decide. And because they don't decide, they never move. They wait for certainty, for a sign, for permission, for conditions to feel right. But life doesn't reward the one who waits. It rewards the one who acts. A decision is not simply saying, I'll try. Trying is weak. Trying keeps the door open for retreat. Decision is commitment. It's closing the other doors and saying, this is the way. Once you make that inner commitment, something extraordinary happens. Your mind aligns. The doubts that once seemed overwhelming begin to quiet down. Not because they disappear, but because they no longer have authority. The mind can only serve one master at a time, and when you decide, you tell it which direction to serve. Indecision is mental conflict, and conflict drains energy. Think of how heavy it feels to be torn between two options. You can't rest because part of your mind is pulled in one direction, and the other part is pulled in the opposite. You wake up thinking about it, you go to bed thinking about it, and every conversation becomes another layer of confusion. You are spending mental energy but gaining no progress. Decision ends that conflict. It unifies your mind and channels your power toward one outcome. That unity of thought and purpose is what creates momentum. Once the mind has a definite aim, it begins to work like a laser, cutting through distraction and finding solutions that were invisible before. Action becomes natural because the decision gives you direction, and direction breeds confidence. People fear decision because they fear making mistakes, but indecision is the greatest mistake of all. While you hesitate, time moves on, opportunities pass, and energy fades. Most of the time, the pain people feel in life is not from failure, it's from not deciding. The mind feeds on movement. When you decide, even if the decision leads you down an imperfect path, you gain feedback, you learn, you grow. The road may twist, but you're still in motion. Overthinking, on the other hand, keeps you stuck at the crossroads, analyzing roads you will never walk. The truth is, you can correct a wrong decision. You can never correct indecision because there's nothing to correct. Nothing was ever begun. Decision is the birthplace of confidence. When you make a decision and stand by it, you prove to yourself that you can trust your own judgment. Every time you do this, your inner strength grows. You begin to rely less on the opinions of others because you recognize that clarity is not something you wait for, it's something you generate. Most people are not lacking opportunity, they are lacking decision. The successful person is not necessarily the smartest or the most talented, but the one who decides quickly and stands firm once the decision is made. Quick decision doesn't mean reckless decision, it means trusting your intuition, listening to your inner guidance, and moving forward with faith that you can handle whatever comes next. The power of decision lies not in predicting the future, but in shaping it. When you decide, you send a signal to your subconscious mind, this is what we are doing. And the subconscious begins working immediately to bring that decision into form. It starts attracting ideas, people, and circumstances that align with that commitment. But if you keep changing your mind, if you keep questioning your direction, that energy dissipates. The mind cannot build on uncertainty. It needs a definite command. You can see this principle in every area of life, in relationships, in business, in personal growth. When a person is unsure, their energy feels scattered, and even others sense that hesitation. But when someone makes a clear decision, doors begin to open because their certainty becomes magnetic. People and circumstances are drawn to decisive energy. Decision doesn't remove fear, it transforms it into fuel. The moment you make a firm choice, fear begins to lose its grip because action overrides anxiety. You realize that fear was just a signal waiting for direction. Once you give the mind a definite order, fear shifts into focus. It's not about waiting until you feel ready. It's about deciding first and letting readiness catch up. Most breakthroughs come after the decision, not before it. The mind cannot show you the path until you commit to walking it. That's why decision is so powerful, it creates the path. It tells life, I'm ready to move. And life responds by rearranging itself around your movement. You'll notice that once a decision is made, opportunities appear that were invisible before. It's not that they weren't there, it's that indecision blinded you to them. Decision sharpens perception. You begin to see connections, people, and resources that match your choice because the mind filters information according to your dominant intention. Before deciding, your energy was diffused, noticing everything but committing to nothing. After deciding, your focus becomes selective, and what was once chaos becomes clear direction. That is why people often describe decisive moments as breakthroughs. They literally break through mental clutter and create a new channel for energy to flow. Decision is not just about choosing between options, it's about reclaiming authority over your own life. Every time you refuse to decide, you hand your power to circumstance. You allow life to push you instead of you steering it. The power of decision is the power of creation. It's the moment when thought becomes command, when possibility becomes intention, and when energy begins to move in a single direction. The world responds to decisive minds because decision vibrates with certainty, and certainty attracts results. Imagination is the unseen workshop of the mind, the silent architect of everything that will ever exist in your life. It is the most powerful faculty you possess, yet most people use it against themselves. They don't realize that imagination and fear are built from the same material. Worry is nothing but imagination twisted in the wrong direction. The same mental power that can create visions of greatness can also create illusions of disaster, and whichever image dominates your imagination becomes your emotional reality. You don't fear because of what is happening, you fear because of what you imagine could happen. Every anxious thought is a mental movie projected on the screen of your mind, and the body reacts to that movie as if it were real. The heartbeat quickens, the breath shortens, muscles tighten, and you start to live inside a story that hasn't even occurred. That is the power of imagination when left undirected. When you understand that imagination is not a passive tool but a creative force, you begin to take responsibility for what you allow it to build. Every time you imagine, you are constructing something in the invisible. The more vividly you hold an image, the stronger the emotional vibration attached to it becomes, and that vibration begins to influence your actions and attract experiences that match it. Most people spend hours imagining problems. They rehearse conversations that might go wrong, outcomes that might fail, and events that might hurt them. Their imagination becomes a rehearsal hall for disappointment. Yet, when you suggest they use the same imagination to picture success, peace, or abundance, they hesitate as if it were unrealistic. But both are equally unreal until they are experienced. The only difference is the direction in which imagination is used. The human mind cannot distinguish between an imagined experience and a physical one when the image is vivid and emotional. Athletes have known this for decades. They mentally rehearse their performance until their muscles begin to respond as if the action were happening. The same principle applies to every part of life. If you constantly imagine loss, rejection, or failure, your subconscious begins to prepare for it. Your behavior subtly adjusts. You speak with less confidence. You hesitate to act. You avoid risks. The imagination becomes a script that the body and emotions obediently follow. That's why overthinking and worry feel so exhausting. You are living multiple lifetimes of fear in your head without ever leaving your chair. Imagination, when used consciously, is not an escape from reality, but a blueprint for it. Every great advancement, every invention, every piece of art, every movement of progress began as an image in someone's mind. The chair you sit on, the phone you hold, the house you live in, all of it existed in imagination before it existed in form. The creative process begins in the unseen. The difference between a dreamer who accomplishes and one who does not is the discipline of imagination. The successful person builds mental pictures deliberately, holds them with faith, and refuses to let fear distort them. The unsuccessful person allows imagination to wander without direction, magnifying uncertainty until it becomes paralysis. The tool is the same. The operator determines the outcome. Fear feeds on uncertainty, but imagination guided by purpose transforms uncertainty into possibility. When you face an unknown situation, the mind immediately begins to imagine outcomes. If you have trained your imagination to focus on faith, it will project potential opportunities, lessons, victories. If you have trained it through years of worry, it will project obstacles, danger, failure, embarrassment. Both are fantasies until proven by experience, yet one expands your capacity to act and the other shrinks it. The choice of which movie to play belongs entirely to you. When you deliberately turn your imagination toward what you desire rather than what you dread, you start to live from a higher frequency. You become more solution-oriented, more courageous, more alive, because your inner pictures inspire movement rather than fear. Imagination is also the bridge between thought and emotion. You can think of an idea, but until you imagine it vividly, it doesn't move you. Emotion is what energizes imagination. When you imagine something vividly enough, it stirs feeling, and that feeling propels action. This is why it is not enough to think about success. You must feel it, see it, walk in it mentally before it arrives physically. The mind must experience it internally before it can manifest it externally. When you dwell on a mental picture long enough, it becomes a belief, and that belief begins to guide behavior unconsciously. You start to act as if it were already true, and life begins to conform to that assumption. Overthinking often blocks this process because it fills the imagination with contradictory images. One moment you imagine winning, the next you imagine losing. The mind becomes confused, and creation stalls. When imagination is dominated by fear, the nervous system becomes addicted to worry. It begins to feel safer rehearsing pain than expecting joy because fear feels familiar. The imagination that could create beauty now serves as a defense mechanism, trying to predict danger before it happens. But prediction is an illusion. It only creates tension. You can't prevent pain by imagining it. You only experience it twice, once in your mind, and again in reality if it ever happens. True peace comes when imagination is reclaimed as a creative instrument, when you begin to visualize outcomes that uplift you rather than imprison you. This isn't wishful thinking, it's conscious creation. The mind that imagines peace attracts conditions that mirror peace. Imagination is the beginning of transformation because it allows you to see beyond your current circumstances. It lets you hold an image of what could be, even when what feels overwhelming. That image becomes a point of focus, a light in the darkness. When you hold it long enough, faith begins to replace fear. You start to understand that the same mental screen projecting your worries can also project your dreams. The imagination does not care what you show it, it will magnify whatever you feed it. If you fill it with worry, you live in worry. If you fill it with faith, you live in confidence. The key is learning to direct it consciously, to treat imagination not as an enemy that invents fear, but as an ally that builds the future. Discipline is often misunderstood as limitation, as a force that restricts freedom or suppresses individuality. But in truth, discipline is the highest form of liberation. It is the bridge between thought and accomplishment, between the idea of who you want to be and the actual experience of becoming that person. Without discipline, the mind becomes a battlefield of impulses, distractions, and unfinished intentions. You may have great dreams, deep insight, and strong desire, but without the structure of discipline, all of it dissolves into wishful thinking. Discipline gives shape to potential. It channels raw energy into focused creation. It is not about forcing yourself to do unpleasant things. It is about directing yourself toward the things that lead to growth, even when comfort tempts you to stay still. Freedom without discipline leads to chaos, but discipline without freedom leads to rigidity. The balance lies in understanding that discipline exists to serve your purpose, not to imprison your spirit. Overthinking flourishes in the absence of discipline because an undisciplined mind wanders endlessly. It drifts from one thought to another, pulled by worry, doubt, and distraction. It reacts to every emotion as if each one deserves full attention, and this constant mental movement creates exhaustion. Discipline brings stillness. It gives the mind a rhythm, a structure, a point of focus. When you practice discipline in thought, you learn to choose what you allow to expand within your awareness. Instead of letting fear dictate your focus, you redirect it toward what strengthens you. This is not suppression, it is mastery. The disciplined mind observes the noise but does not obey it. It knows when to act and when to let go. This ability to guide your own attention is one of the purest forms of freedom, because you are no longer controlled by circumstances or emotions. You are guided by intention. In life, everything is governed by law and order. Nature itself is disciplined. The sun rises and sets in precision. The tides follow their rhythm. The seasons move in harmony, and life renews itself through patterns of order. Discipline is simply aligning yourself with that universal order. It is living with deliberate rhythm instead of random reaction. When you build habits that serve your vision, waking early, organizing your thoughts, controlling your words, keeping your promises, you are practicing alignment with the laws of creation. The person who lives without discipline is like a river without banks. Their energy spreads too thin and loses force. But the one who builds the banks of discipline allows that same energy to move with power and purpose, carving valleys of achievement wherever it flows. Discipline is not about perfection. It is about consistency. The results of a disciplined life are not seen overnight. They are built in quiet moments when no one is watching, in the hours you choose to study instead of scrolling, to work instead of procrastinate, to reflect instead of react. These small choices accumulate. They build character, focus, and inner strength. Over time, discipline becomes a habit, and habit becomes identity. You no longer force yourself to act, it becomes natural. This is the secret of freedom. When discipline becomes automatic, your energy is no longer wasted in constant decision-making. You gain mental space, emotional clarity, and confidence in your own ability to follow through. Most people believe freedom is doing whatever they want, whenever they want, but that kind of freedom leads to regret because it ignores consequence. True freedom is having control over yourself, the power to direct your time, your thoughts, and your energy toward what truly matters. The undisciplined mind lives in reaction. It moves according to mood. If it feels motivated, it works. If not, it quits. If it feels fear, it retreats. If it feels excitement, it runs forward. Such a life is unstable because emotions change like weather. Discipline stabilizes you. It teaches you to act based on decision, not emotion. You learn that commitment comes before feeling, not after it. You don't wait to feel ready. You act and allow readiness to grow through repetition. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you strengthen that inner muscle. You begin to trust your own word. That trust creates confidence, and confidence silences overthinking. You no longer waste time debating whether you can or cannot, you simply do, because discipline has trained you to move beyond doubt. Discipline also protects your peace. When your life is structured by principles, not impulses, chaos loses access to you. You know what deserves your attention and what doesn't. You stop getting pulled into unnecessary arguments, unproductive habits, and time-wasting distractions. You start saying, no, not out of fear, but out of clarity. That clarity is a product of discipline. It shows you what aligns with your purpose and what does not. It filters the noise of the world, allowing you to hear the voice of your own direction. The more disciplined you become, the simpler life feels, because you are no longer divided between endless choices. You know what you're about, and that knowing brings calm. Some think discipline kills creativity, but the opposite is true. Creativity needs space, and space is created through order. When the mind is scattered, creativity cannot flow freely. But when discipline organizes your time and thought, creativity finds room to breathe. Many of the greatest creators, writers, artists, musicians, inventors live by routines that may seem strict, yet those routines are what allow their imagination to flourish. Discipline clears mental clutter. It removes indecision and procrastination, giving your mind freedom to focus entirely on creation. Structure is not the enemy of inspiration, it is the soil that allows it to grow. Discipline is also an act of self-respect. It is saying to yourself, I am worth the effort it takes to follow through. When you live without discipline, you allow fleeting desires to dictate your actions. You postpone what matters. You betray your own goals by choosing comfort over commitment. But when you practice discipline, you honor yourself. You keep promises not because it's easy, but because it's right. You hold yourself accountable even when no one is watching, because you understand that self-respect is not something you demand from others, it's something you build through your own consistency. Discipline becomes your silent declaration of strength, the invisible backbone of every achievement. It transforms you from a victim of your habits into the architect of your destiny. Life truly begins where certainty ends. The need for control and absolute assurance is what keeps most people from ever experiencing the fullness of living. From childhood, we are conditioned to seek safety, predictability, and comfort, but nothing extraordinary grows within the walls of comfort. The human spirit was designed for exploration, for stepping into the unknown and discovering what it is capable of. Overthinking is the mind's attempt to create false certainty to map out every possible outcome before taking a step. It convinces you that if you think long enough, you'll avoid mistakes, pain, or loss. But the irony is that by trying to eliminate uncertainty, you also eliminate possibility. Life's richest experiences, love, growth, discovery, creation, all exist in that uncertain space beyond what is known. The moment you demand guarantees before you act, you stop evolving, and the fire within you begins to fade. Growth is uncomfortable because it requires letting go of what is familiar. The familiar feels safe, even when it's unfulfilling. People stay in jobs they dislike, relationships that drain them, and routines that numb them simply because those things are known. The unknown represents risk, and the mind equates risk with danger. Yet, if you look back at every meaningful turning point in your life, it began when you stepped beyond what you knew. You learned, adapted, and became more because you dared to act without knowing the outcome. Certainty may give temporary peace, but it also breeds stagnation. Uncertainty, on the other hand, awakens potential. It forces you to grow muscles you didn't know you had. It reveals the depth of your faith, the strength of your resilience, and the creativity of your spirit. Overthinking is the mind's way of clinging to certainty. It analyzes every detail, predicts every scenario, and tries to calculate the future like a mathematician solving an equation. But life is not an equation, it's an experience. The more you analyze, the more disconnected you become from the present moment, and the present moment is where life actually happens. The person who overthinks is not living. They are waiting for perfect timing, perfect clarity, perfect conditions. That waiting becomes a silent trap. The world keeps moving, opportunities pass, and energy fades. The truth is, you can't think your way into living. You can only live your way into clarity. Action brings understanding. Every step taken, no matter how uncertain, reveals something that thinking never could. You don't need to see the entire staircase to climb it. You just need to trust the first step. Life rewards movement, not hesitation. Nature itself operates through motion. Rivers flow, winds shift, seasons change, and everything that lives is in a constant state of becoming. Only the human mind resists this flow, trying to freeze life into predictable patterns. But the beauty of existence lies in its unpredictability. It is the unknown that makes life worth living. Imagine knowing every event that would ever happen to you before it occurred. The excitement, the challenge, the mystery would all vanish. You would no longer be living. You would be acting out a script. The unknown gives life its color, its thrill, its sense of wonder. To live fully is to embrace that uncertainty, to walk into the mystery with trust that whatever meets you on the other side will be for your growth. Living where certainty ends does not mean living recklessly. It means living courageously. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the decision to move despite fear. Fear will always whisper, what if it doesn't work? Courage replies, what if it does? That small shift in focus is the difference between a life of regret and a life of fulfillment. Every person who has achieved something remarkable has faced that moment of uncertainty. They didn't know if their vision would succeed, but they acted anyway. They learned through experience, adjusted, and grew. Action transforms uncertainty into wisdom. The person who never acts remains trapped in speculation, while the one who acts gains knowledge and strength. Failure, too, is part of this process, not as punishment, but as refinement. Each step, even the missteps, shapes you into someone wiser and stronger. Certainty is seductive because it offers comfort, but comfort is the slow poison of potential. When you live only within the limits of what you know, you repeat the same experiences in different forms. Days blur into weeks, weeks into years, and nothing truly changes. The spirit begins to hunger for something more, a deeper sense of purpose, a spark of adventure, a feeling of aliveness. That hunger is your inner call to step into the unknown. The unknown is not your enemy, it is your ally, the territory where your greatest growth awaits. Everything new you desire, success, love, transformation lives just beyond the edge of certainty. You reach it only by trusting the process more than the plan. The reason uncertainty feels frightening is because the mind is attached to control. It wants guarantees that actions will produce predictable results. But life doesn't operate by control, it operates by faith and response. You move, life responds, and through that interaction, you evolve. The most liberated people are not those who know what's coming next, but those who have learned to trust themselves no matter what comes. They know that whatever happens, they can adapt, learn, and find meaning. That self-trust is born only in uncertainty. You can't develop resilience if you never face challenge. You can't cultivate faith if you never walk through doubt. You can't build strength if everything is always easy. The unknown is not a void to fear, it's a field of possibility waiting to be shaped by your courage. Living beyond certainty is not about reckless leaps into chaos, it's about surrendering the illusion of control. It's realizing that you don't need to know every answer before you act. You only need to know your intention. When your intention is clear, the next step reveals itself as you move. The road unfolds as you walk it. The person who insists on seeing the entire map before starting the journey will remain stuck at the beginning forever. Life's wisdom is discovered only by those willing to walk in partial light, guided by faith, intuition, and a quiet trust that each step will make the next one visible. The unknown may challenge you, but it also shapes you. It strips away false security and awakens your authentic power, the kind that doesn't depend on circumstance but comes from within.